Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar, Upgrading to Altiris 8.5, Features and Considerations. My name is Mike Dunham. I'm the president of Intuitive Technology Group, and I'd like to personally welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend an hour with us to talk a little bit about some of the new features that are in Altiris. They're also known as the Symantec Endpoint Management, and a variety of other names as well, but that's what we'll be talking about today. First off, I'd like to thank Symantec for sponsoring this webinar. We've had the opportunity to work with Symantec for many years, and they have been a good partner to us, and hopefully they feel the same about us. With that, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to do a quick level set for the group, and then I will get out of the way and have our consultants speak about some of the upgrades that we have been doing with 8.5 and the experiences we've had with it. So first off, a little bit about Intuitive. Intuitive's been around for almost 13 years now. We have, over the last year, actually transitioned into an employee-owned company, and that's given us the ability for all the people within our organization to participate in the ownership and growth of our company. We're pretty proud of our growth. We're over 120 employees at this point. We're still based in the Twin Cities, but we do have employees working in 38 states at this point, so we certainly have a national presence. And I know that just looking at some of the names of folks who are on this call, I recognize a number of you and appreciate the business we've done with you in the past. And again, it's just a testament to the quality of work that our technicians and engineers do. So thank you to all of you for being here. In terms of the places that our company focuses, we've actually broadened our scope a little bit. We started as an Altiris partner and remain that way. The endpoint management practice is a large part of our business, but we have actually grown to include a number of different other technologies as well. And as we take a look at the company, we focus on engaging with our employees or with our customers where they sit, and whether that means coming in for a coaching session or doing some consulting or training. We can certainly do that. If you need to engage with us simply to procure licensing and advice on how to go about it, we can do that as well. We also engage with our clients on a staffing perspective. So if you need somebody for 6 months or permanently or somewhere in between, we can help you out with that as well. So some of the things that we focus on, again, we have a strong practice in business process, and really that comes out of our roots, the fact that we've been involved with systems management for so long, looking at how we can help the business be more effective. We have grown, and at this point we engage with IT systems management and how that leverages into an overall security practice. But in the process, we've also developed some great skills around big data, around DevOps, and as I mentioned, for the business side, the lean agile focus as well, and helping to drive the velocity as well as the waste out of the typical day-to-day process within your organization. We spend a tremendous amount of time focused on automation, focused on allowing our customers to get the best out of their products as well as the people who work on them. So with that, I could certainly spend a long time talking about Intuitive, but I know that we have another topic to get to, and that is the fact that Symantec has just released within the last couple of weeks the 8.5 version of the endpoint management product stack. And we have a couple of folks on our team who have already been very much engaged in projects on 8.5. And the goal today is to spend a little time talking about those upgrades that we've done, some of the things that we've seen, some gotchas, some places where it was smooth sailing, and some of the features that have impacted our clients already. I'd like to introduce to you Paul Manfredi and Matt Green. Paul has been working on an upgrade for a large healthcare organization that we work with out of Texas that has about 30,000 nodes under management. And he worked with them as well as with Symantec in their early adopter program to do that upgrade and get that code out the door even before it was general release available. He's currently engaged with a large healthcare organization out of the West Coast that has about 200,000 nodes under management. So he certainly has had an opportunity just in the past few weeks to engage on this new product platform and to help those customers see the benefits as well as get through the hurdles and pitfalls that go with any upgrade. Paul's background, he's been working on the Altiris product set since 2000 approximately. So I've been working with Paul for the better part of almost 20 years working on Altiris, and he has worked with some of the largest as well as some of the smallest organizations across North America as well as in Europe and in the South Pacific. So he's certainly had a chance to experience many different implementations, many different use cases over that time. He's also one of the lead subject matter experts on asset management and how you can really use Altiris to drive your business process and drive a lot of those costs out of your IT management infrastructure. So certainly, if it makes sense for you, we'd love to engage with Paul on a one-on-one with you to discuss some of those topics. We also have Matt Green. And Matt is every bit as senior as Paul is in his expertise around Altiris. He's been working with the product about the same amount of time as Paul has, and has worked with many clients over the South Central U.S. as well as on the East Coast and some folks up north as well. And similarly, his experiences range across all industries and all verticals. And he has a lot of good expertise to share as well. He acts as project manager for many of our projects as well as team lead, simply because of the breadth of experience that he has as well. So I think you'll really appreciate the opportunity to hear from both Matt and Paul and get a chance to see some of the new things within IT Management Suite, as well as some of the experiences that they've had through the rollout, through the launch, as well as through their implementation work with some of the clients that we're currently working with. So with that, Matt and Paul, if you want to take over, I'll step aside.
Great, thanks, Mike, and thanks for that great info. That great introduction. I'm just going to share on my screen here and get the slide deck up. Okay, can you see my screen okay, Mike?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. Okay, thanks again, everyone, for joining us this morning. Also, I appreciate you taking the time out of, we've all got busy schedules to take time in today's conversation. Today's webinar is our first in a series that's focused specifically on Symantec's IT Management Suite 8.5, which came into GA, I think it was September 28th, so it's been about a month now. It's very new to all of us, myself included. As Mike mentioned, I have had the opportunity to complete 2 implementations so far, and I'm working on the third one, which is quite a large environment, so that one's going to go for a couple months. But ultimately, the goal is get us to 8.5, and yeah, the implementations they've been very smooth up until now. The 30-odd thousand node environment went very well. It was, I think, about 38 sites in all. The part really that impressed me the most was the speed at which those upgrades are going out there by leveraging the peer-to-peer connectivity and the agent settings. But we'll get into that a little bit later. I've got a deck that I'd like to go through with us and look at the high-level set of the new features. I'll try to bring up my lab environment where possible to actually show you what we're talking about, and then we'll go through a couple of different recipes around what type of upgrade may be best for you, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So I get to go through the intro. So here's today's agenda. So first off, we'll look at the new feature set, and Symantec has essentially broken that down into 3 tenets. So security, we'll look at the introduction of persistent connections and the time critical management features. Then we'll look at the endpoint compliance and quarantine and the integrations around endpoint protection manager, and specifically look at the protection automation in Symantec Endpoint. So if you are a SEP client, there's a lot of more complete integration here, I would say. Next up, we'll look at the modern software portal, the rebuilt software portal under the productivity set. We'll then take a closer look at the endpoint management workspaces, again, the new UI that goes along with time critical management. And lastly, the versatility tenet, where we talk a little bit about patch management, peer-to-peer optimization for O365 updates. And then the second portion of the webinar is going to be focused on the considerations around the options of your upgrade, the pre-upgrade tasks that you'll need to ensure a successful outcome, best practices, etc. And lastly, we'll open it up to any specific questions and Q&A. Okay, the new features around persistent and time critical management. So persistent connection in IT Management Suite essentially enables real-time data transfer both to and from the Symantec management agent, and lets us perform tasks on client computers in real time. Examples of this can be real-time inventory gathering on client computers to validate current hardware, software, vulnerability states, etc. So it is policy-based. I'll show you in a minute in the console that we bring it up via the policy for time critical inventory, for example. We can schedule it. It does support maintenance windows. We can apply it either to single endpoints or groups, filter based. And that data, one of the advantages is that data that it collects is immediately posted to the CMDB. So it gives us a lot of agility to react to a vulnerability threat, for example. It works as our existing infrastructure works now. If we're CEM enabled, we can just hit a remote machine out on the internet exactly the same way as we do now through the LAN. So it's essentially layering on more real-time policy as opposed to task. And it does that by leveraging the WebSocket technology layered into SSL. There's no additional setup needed. The machines are immediately connected. Again, vulnerabilities are more immediately apparent. In the case of, a software vulnerability that needs to be addressed in near real time, 0-day, that sort of scenario. And again, posted to the CMDB immediately. So again, no extra agent setup needed. It's part of the base Symantec management agent. It maintains bidirectional connection at the endpoints. It reduces that overhead and time needed for event processing. There's virtually no delay between the policy setup and execution. It's end-to-end secure via SSL, so it runs over 443. It adds the on-demand inventory to existing scheduled inventory policies. We can immediately query endpoints for the required information on demand and get that data without any delays. We can find software, critical data sets right now as opposed to waiting for that schedule, that policy schedule to kick in. And that'll flesh out any evidence of compromise in real time. That's really the driving force behind it. It's to get us to that near real-time management of the endpoint. It's got heterogeneous.
Paul, it sounds to
Sorry, go ahead.
So Paul, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that this gives a lot of the long-time Altiris customers that real-time capability that came out of deployment server within the notification server.
Right.
And being able to
instant, exactly. That instant gratification of I've sent something and it's there essentially in an instant. And
so it gives me the.
Yep. Go ahead.
So it gives me the ability to not only have my engineers who would typically schedule everything within the notification server, but also my help desk staff who need to immediately grab a computer and do something to it, the capability to truly use the notification server across both of those aspects.
Exactly. And that's one of that's one of the main pieces in the quick tasks that we'll see a little bit later under the time critical management new UI that's been released along with it. So the next piece, well, let me just bring this down for a second and see if I can get the console up here. Can you see my console here?
Sure can.
Okay, great. So there's a couple of places we need to turn it on. The first is over here in settings, all settings, notification server. So now we have this new addition under time critical management where we just need to enable it. The next spot would be over in the site server settings. It needs to be enabled on the site servers also. So just in the site server settings, there's again another switch to turn it on to leverage it between the site server and the agents themselves. And lastly, in the communication profiles, there's a spot that it needs to be turned on. So if we look at the our notification server communication profile, and here's where we would set the actual settings for the persistent connection of that communication profile. So fully configurable, timeout, persistent connection, 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds, essentially, it's checking the heartbeat, number of reconnection attempts, that sort of thing.
So this is going to give us the granular control over our bandwidth while still maintaining the persistence.
Exactly. And
nice.
One last spot to look at here is the actual policy that's been added. So there's a specific inventory policy that's been added to it that's called time critical inventory. And if we break that out right here, and that's also customizable. So this inventory essentially is, you could think of it as a delta that's keeping us current every hour via a policy. So at very worst, we're 1 hour, we're 1 hour old on any hardware or software data classes that we choose to collect as part of that policy. As well as real-time, the real-time software inventory, that's near real-time. That is not running on that hour basis. One thing worth noting related to persistent is in the agent settings themselves. there's a new timestamp that some of you may have noticed if you're already working on it, and that's pushed. And what pushed is really telling us is because of that persistent connection, I can essentially push any policy as an administrator. So for example, if I wanted to run full server inventory or let's say a Delta server inventory right now on my target of endpoints, I can just push that policy. And it's going to happen on those 7 of 30 machines. And I didn't need to do anything there. And you see the timestamp is already changed, which means the machine essentially received that policy immediately. No need to do a Delta resource membership update. No need to wait for the next configuration update, policy check-in, or execution time of that check-in. It's going to happen in near real time. All right. Next up is endpoint compliance and quarantine. So let me just get back to my presentation. Sorry, it slowed down my machine a little bit running all these VMs.
I think that's
There we go.
all. That really sounds like a good source of change and into the daily operations of the IT management suite. Though, if you've got the ability to go in there, grab that compliance report real time, and potentially filter that information out to reports to executives in critical times. So that sounds like great stuff.
It does. It's essentially it's a game changer as far as the agility and ability to execute immediately. So, you know, if you think of a 0-day patch that needs to go out there, we've got it downloaded, we've got it staged, but it's got this policy attached to it. You know, we can leverage that patch target and essentially get it out there immediately. And there are multiple ways to do that. This is just, you know, the right-click push policy is really only one way of doing it. We'll see in a minute, we can do it also by using the time-critical management interface. So let's move on to endpoint compliance and quarantine. So here, the solution enables the ITMS admin to create quarantine policies based on specific CVE IDs. Let me see. There we go. We use the ITMS patch management assessment scan to evaluate compliance, and then it's integrated with the SET manager to move devices to and from quarantine based on that compliance evaluation. So the obvious customer benefits here are not only are only devices that are compliant with patch policies are allowed to connect to the network. So we're essentially locking machines out. And I'll show you what that looks like. A couple of different tabs here. So I've got my integration under settings. I can integrate, so I've connected to my SEPM here. So now I have integration to my SEPM machine, and I've built a quarantine policy based on these 3 CVE numbers. And those 3 CVE numbers I essentially got from using this bulletin number on a patch or on a bulletin not installed that brought back these 2 of my endpoints. So those 2 endpoints, I can just quickly create a filter based out of those 2. And I have a report here that tells me the CVE number that matches the patch name. And that lets me create, sorry if I'm zipping through here. I want to make sure that I get to everything. I want to build that policy of identifying the compliance check against these three CVE IDs, I can use, this is set to essentially all machines in the environment that has the software update plugin. But I could, scope the filter down to just the machines. I could specifically exclude machines that I didn't want put into that quarantine policy. And I could give a grace period of those machines. I could change it to, let's say, tomorrow. So if they're not up to date by tomorrow, they'll be put into quarantine, and they'll essentially receive a message like this one here that will tell them essentially a screen come up on their window, on their desktop or whatever, and tell them you're quarantined, you have to take action. So again, we can essentially lock those machines out of the network until they're compliant to what we deem as compliance in our environment. Again, here supports OS, Mac, third-party applications. Essentially an extension. It's an extension of patch management integrated with Symantec Endpoint Management. The automation protection of Symantec Endpoint Management also, the 8.5 version extends the collection of SEP agent specific data to better evaluate and collect metrics on that data. The state of different Symantec endpoint protection metrics related to antivirus, firewall, the service, the SEP manager groups will also now be available in reports and dashboards. And the data can be used to initiate policies through the SMP platform. So the SEP integration and reporting has become a lot more developed. So here's a couple of screenshots around, the kind of agent data that we get now from the endpoints directly. So if we look at it over here, for example, and I take one of my machines in my lab. So let's say I take my Windows 7 box. I see agent health, so I get my Symantec management agent. I get my plugin versions, which is all standard and new. I did get some of this in the 8.1 version also, but the interface now has more definition and more attributes around the SEP agent health. I just realized I'm not showing you that screen. Here we go. So these are the SEP agent health metrics now that we can see in the 8.5 interface. So again, that SEP agent distribution method is also being developed where admins can easily create those policies to install or upgrade the SEP agents simply by pointing to the package and selecting the target. So the import process pulls that metadata from the SEP agent package to create the agent delivery policy with a predefined base target already assigned. So it's quite simple now to deploy those SEP agents via the SMP console. Lastly, this release also provides an out-of-the-box remediation action that can be used in cases where the SEP agent the SEP agent service is in a stop state. The control SEP service state task can be executed from within the console summary. So this one down here, the summary dashboard, or as a standalone task in automation. So again, we're closing the loop on endpoint security and that integration into into the SMP between SEPM and the SMP consoles. Sorry about that. I just got a little delay here in my box. Another integration worth mentioning, I don't have it in my environment, but it's CCS, Control Compliance Suite Manager. So that, again, a separate platform that creates data around any and all vulnerability in the environment by way of those compliance scan rules that run. And what we can do with that is import those scan results now and essentially automatically deliver patches and build remediation policy based on the results of those compliance scans.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that integration up. I know that's one we're not going to be demoing today, but it's an important piece because I know that you and I have had the chance to work with some clients this year.
That's right.
With the issue of getting the deciding which tools I'm going to hold as source of truth for my compliance. Exactly. As most of the folks on the call are aware, oftentimes based on your business, you may need to be PCI compliant, or you may need to be STIGS compliant, or you may need to be CIS compliant, or a variety of other standards. And being able to utilize your compliance assessment tool directly with your endpoint management or configuration management tool is a huge integration piece. And one of the things that Symantec's really been striving to do over the past couple of years is pull these tools together for a single pane of glass so that you can give your executives, give your security team, as well as your operations team, a comprehensive outlook on whether or not I am compliant to a particular standard and how that actually translates into an operational mode.
Exactly. And a lot of that, we all know that InfoSec folks speak in terms of CVE, and addressing CVEs. So even with the SEPM integration, we have a clear path, a clear reportable path back to those CVEs, and if they're addressed. The addition of CCS here gives us the more holistic approach to vulnerabilities at large, whether they be Windows-based and within the control or the capabilities of SMP, or whether they be outside. But at least we know that by this integration, we can automatically address the ones that are under the control of the SMP platform. So a lot of great things there. Okay, lastly, we'll look at the productivity tenet around the new features of the 8.5 platform. And a lot of you may have already seen the modern UI of the software portal. Again, it is worth mentioning here. An upgraded modern UI with an app store look or feel. Some important pieces to note here. It is browser agnostic, so it doesn't HTML5 based, I believe. Users get the apps based on the OS type automatically, so it'll do the detection. Works across the main OSs, so Windows, Mac users, they'll automatically get the apps based on their OS. It's customizable around the logo and branding, regardless of connectivity also, so we can hit machines via CEM the same way we can inside the corporate LAN. again, the idea here is we build out a set of apps that don't require a help desk call. We can build a self-service type environment for that set of standard apps, freeware, etc. We can also put approvals around apps that we deliver in the App Store. Maybe not Microsoft Visio Viewer, but a full version of Visio or a full version of Acrobat Writer that require approval. And those can go to our software asset manager, for example, that require that approval, and then automatic delivery of that app will ensue. Next up, the modern workspaces. So the new UI that some of you may have seen. The Endpoint Management Workspaces is a brand new console with dedicated pages that we're referring to as workspaces. Also widgets that are designed to simplify and speed up the day-to-day endpoint management operations and jobs. So with the help of the Symantec Endpoint Management Workspaces, example, help desk workers can respond quickly to tickets and requests for software delivery, running a task on a specific machine. So this works great in an environment where you need a large group of help desk folks, for example, to leverage the functionality that we have in Altiris, but you don't necessarily want them to have console access. So this interface is really what answers that question. That the user experience is optimized, and again, based on roles and responsibilities, those end users will only have access to what they need. The interface reduces the screens and clicks to decrease the time by roughly 50%. The first-time user experience virtually eliminates any training. I mean, it's very, we'll try to take a look at it here in a second, but it's very straightforward. By guiding the user or the help desk tech through the individual screens, we're guided to the finish line. So the reduction of human errors is probably around 90%, saving that end user impact and remediation. The flexibility around the end user experience and again, the agility that this provides as part of the platform in addition to the platform. We're free to use, again, this is also browser agnostic, so we're free to use whichever browser type we need. No plugins required. You can access it from Mac OS even. And the planned support is coming up for mobile browsers also. So the idea of a help desk user being able to use this via tablet is also on the books. Here's a couple of screenshots. So example, you can do a software delivery, choose the machine in this second window over here on the right, and then a list of the software you want to deliver. And that's really as much as you need to do there. The delivery of it is really quite straightforward. I'll try to bring up the interface here again. Let's see.
So Paul, just a quick interface question. If I'm watching this right, it looks like for many of the new spaces that either a help desk worker or an end user would use, there's no need for those plugins, all the cab file downloads that used to take place, et cetera. But the console itself, the administrator may still need to have his Silverlight, may need a couple of cabs installed, and might even need IE in some situations.
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, here in the lab environment, I click Deliver Software. I choose one of my software jobs. I say Next. It'll give me a listing of, which machine do you want to put it on. I'll go grab my Windows 7 box again. And then just hit Next and Deliver. It tells me that it's ready to go. I deliver it. It won't actually deliver it because I paused that box for our presentation, but that's it. And then I get a message and it's done. It's really fire and forget. Lastly, versatility. So again, along the same lines, patch management. Patch management at this point, I think is quite mature, but there's always more that can be done. And I think I think they've come through and done that. Again, if we go through the pieces around existing patch management, firstly, patch management solution for Windows now supports Express updates technology that's built into Windows Update Service, and that optimizes distribution of some updates, mainly the large ones for Microsoft products, by only downloading the incremental changes. That Windows Update patching supports the Express updates technology that updates the distribution of some updates, the Microsoft products, by getting those incremental changes, as I mentioned. Things like the monthly quality updates for Windows 7 or 8, and right now also for Windows 10, but prior to 1809, the 1809 version. So what this means is we can leverage both the traditional Altiris patching approach along with that Windows Update patching for a combined approach. If anybody needs, I've got several articles via Symantec's support site that detail the different methods and compare the features of each of those tool sets. So again here, just quick overview, whether we're inside the network, Windows, Mac, Linux, Unix, outside the network, at a hotel, traveling, working from home via the web, we're going to get those machines patched, and with that added piece of time critical management, we're really going to get it done a lot quicker when we need to. Just a quick walkthrough of that peer-to-peer optimization that I talked about. So the first step here is one of the endpoints needs that Office 365 patch or update, for example. It sends out a request to the peers to check for availability on any of those peers. If none of those, or in this case, if neither of those peers has that patch available currently, it's going to go and download it from the SMP. And once it's got that, it's going to notify the machines in its peer group that it's got the, it started the download of the package. And what they're going to do after a time delay is they're going to start downloading those pieces of the package directly from that first endpoint. So again, the speed with which an update of about a gig and a half can happen inside this segment and not go back to package server or ultimately a SMP box. So a large optimization here for peer-to-peer, especially when it comes to Office 365, because we know how big those packages can get. All right.
So that's a huge one, Paul. So then, in terms of the design of my infrastructure, this would allow me to potentially call back some package servers, or where I've got package servers that might be running a client OS, that it can pull the load off of them to some degree with the limitations coming under the Win 7 or Win 10 number of connections that the OS itself allows.
That's right. So again, we're all about trying to get as much productivity through the wire with that single pull back to the server.
Nice.
All right, next part I wanted to look at here is our upgrade options and approach that we can take when looking to move to ITMS 8.5 or CMS, depending on whether you've got the full suite or just the client management suite. Essentially the same process, CMS or ITMS. So it basically breaks down into 3 possible use cases, and we'll look at each one. The first being a direct on-box upgrade. The second being a full off-box migration. It's not, I mean, it is an upgrade, but it is a migration because it's going on to new hardware. And the third one we'll look at is what we call the in-place database upgrade, which is essentially a hybrid of the first 2. Before we get into that, a couple of new OS support matrix entries for the 8.5 platform. So we're now fully supported on Server 2016, SQL 2016 up to SP2, a couple of new flavors of Solaris and Linux, and of course OS X 10.13 now. I've got a link here that's readily available on the web as far as the OS matrix goes. So when we look at upgrading or migrating, the first big question is, do I upgrade or do I migrate? The answer can be different depending on your specific environment. Perhaps you just did a hardware upgrade and you're well within the recommended specs of 8.5, then I'd say an on-box migration may be the right move. Or maybe you've been running 8.0 for the past couple of years and now you know it's time for a new server, then migrating would be the right choice. So we'll look at the pros and cons of each, upgrading versus migration, and it should give us a little idea of which road to take. So let's take a look at the upgrade first. So the obvious pros here are it's very straightforward. It's done via the SIM, similar to a hotfix install. It's relatively quick, taking on average 2 to 3 hours to complete the initial upgrade of the SMP and database. As with all 3 approaches, again, your existing ITMS environment will need to be either at 8.0 hotfix 6 or 8.1 HF7. Which are the 2 supported upgrade paths. That's not to say you can bring it from 7.6, you just need to do 2 hops to get it to one of these 2 versions. The on-box upgrade option, yep.
I was going to say, so
yep.
is this the strategy you took with that 30,000 node environment?
So yeah, the first one was an on-box upgrade. We did some SQL tweaking that we probably won't have time to go through today, but
sure.
We optimized SQL and we brought in, we leveraged the on-box upgrade migration. And
okay,
once that was, I mean, we're talking about literally within 5 days, this was complete. So this is not
for
a
all
major,
30,000 nodes.
Yeah, this is not a major project like it used to be. As we see more and more success with those agent migrations, we ramp up. So we go, 50 the first day, 500 the second day, 5,000 the third day, kind of thing, until all of the endpoints have been migrated.
Nice.
So that on-box upgrade is ideal for that server environment that doesn't need the OS upgrade or the hardware refresh. All of the settings are retained after the upgrade completes. You just have to remember to stop any scheduled policies before the upgrade and then restart them after the upgrade's done and the server's settled. Typically, we let it settle overnight after the upgrade's done. So like I said, that upgrade can be done literally in a matter of a few days, which would include those agent migrations, again, depending on hardware being used, the size of your environment, network architecture, that sort of thing. So the cons are really, there are no cons, but I would ensure in case of rollback, the most recent backups are available. Again, like any upgrade, all that existing data is coming along. So any old policy, data resource, history information is all kept. So you're going to get what you had in the database before. So if you thought your database was bloated before, it's still going to be the same. There's no database maintenance, for example, that happens by way of resource history or purging maintenance. That's those sorts of policies that'll need to be put into place to keep that database in check. Use case.
Well, do you mind if I just underscore and stamp on that whole comment? Make sure your backups are recent and that they work. I have encountered customers who thought they had good backups but hadn't been testing them.
Yep, same here, Mike. So let's look at migration now. So migration, the pros here. Well, the obvious pro is you get a new SMP and SQL database with fresh OS install on both. To me, that's a definite pro. You also get a clean, fresh database on the new server, hopefully with the proper specs. A brand new SQL environment is a definite plus. Clean, fast. You don't have any downtime, so that's also a definite pro, because you bring it up in parallel with your existing environment, and once it's up and running, you begin redirecting clients in a phased approach, or whatever makes the most sense in your environment. And this is done after you've moved all your policies, tasks, filters, targets, patch and software repository resources have been migrated. So essentially, you control the pace of the migration. As far as cons go, it's a longer process to complete, and you'll need to do more planning around the execution of that upgrade. So it's a more complex route to take, but may be necessary depending on your requirements and that need to upgrade your hardware, your OS, and your SQL, for example. There are more manual configuration steps that need to be followed to get it done. There's the whole data migration to consider. So again, those settings, policy, jobs, tasks, security, resources, filters, all the pieces that you had that you want to bring over, they've got to be, architected out to make sure that they come over properly to ensure a successful migration. So you'll need to take a look at your existing ITMS and choose which path works best for you. So let's take a look at that third option. I'm just going to go through these a little bit. This is really the only thing you'd have to worry. I put an old 7.6 up here first. I mean, you can't break it trying to upgrade a 7.6. You'll just get stopped in the sim while trying to attempt it. So the off-box migration, we talked about, you'd have to run a replication rule to replicate those pieces of data that we talked about, the resources and tasks, etc. Again, you'd start with a clean database. I want to get through this to make sure that these are all pieces that we discussed. One piece we do use is a software resource replicator. That's noteworthy. The software resource replicator is a utility that's specifically used for all the information related to a deliverable software resource. This means the logical side of the software package, including the product, manufacturer info, the security info, detection, applicability rules, everything around that. What it won't do is migrate the physical packages themselves. They'll need to be migrated separately if that location is changed. So if the software repository is in the default location, it'll need to be moved. If it's in an independent location, for example, a UNC path on a repository server, it can remain the same. Any software agent info is not migrated, and that's to make sure that we don't have any version mismatches in our management agent or solution plugins. It dynamically builds that list, and based on what I've seen, it does roughly 2,000 resources per hour, so it's a pretty good pace. So here's the third option, which essentially we've talked about as a hybrid to the first two. It's a little different in the fact that from that standard off-box migration we saw previously, we call it the in-place database upgrade. And what we basically do here is we reuse the existing database on the new hardware platform. This way you can implement a new physical SMP server, a new physical or virtual SMP or SQL server, while keeping all of that existing configuration. And the way we do this is by taking a backup of the database and then restoring it to that new SQL server. That restored database is upgraded to 8.5 during the ITMS installation process on the new SMP server. And like we saw earlier, is similar to an on-box migration where it keeps all of its data and configuration settings. This scenario essentially takes the best parts of the first two options. The obvious advantage here in this case is that we're also able to upgrade the physical or the hardware behind the implementation itself, so the SMP and the SQL notably. Again, here we need to be on one of the two supported platforms before attempting the backup, or the migration could fail and damage the database structure. So we need to make sure that before we do this, we're at one of the supported versions. So again, what that means is if you're not already on one of those versions, you'll need to upgrade to the correct hotfix level. And as I mentioned a minute ago, you could be on 7.6 HF5, for example, but you would need to move it to HF7 of version 7.6 and then over to 8.0 HF6. So there's a couple of steps to get there, but you can get there. It's just a little longer. After your SMP server's at the supported version and you've got that recent backup of the database, it'll need to be restored. When that restore is complete, the Symantec Installation Manager can be run on the new SMP box. And during the configuration portion, you'll simply point to the restored SQL database, and the Symantec Installation Manager will upgrade it to the 8X version. So again, highlighting the benefits here, it allows us to reuse the database, which means it keeps all of your resource information, configuration, policies, really everything. The service account is maintained, which sometimes can be a challenge to recreate. One of the main benefits here is that the old server remains functional also, with the original CMDB database running in place, and continues servicing those endpoints while the new one is brought online. This is probably the most used scenario that we implement now, given the fact that a lot of folks need to get off 08 and even Server 2012 and move to Server 2016. This is really the way to go. Best practices, as always, ensure that you've got recent backups, both of the database. Your deployment image snapshots of VM can suffice. Existing server health, review those logs, make sure you have available data disk space on all your drives. SQL health, I really can't emphasize enough the importance of SQL Server to the overall performance of the ITMS environment. When planning the upgrade on new hardware, a physical database is always #1 choice. If virtualization is the only choice, we should try to make sure that we can get some resource reservations, typically in the 75% range. If we get pushback from our VM architects, we have to make them understand that the nature of communication between the SQL Server and the SMP is burstable. So we'll see dips in traffic, and we'll also see spikes depending on, things like policy schedules, that sort of thing. As far as drives go, 4 logical drives will always render the best results. So make sure our data logs are on separate drives. RAID 10 always versus RAID 5. Separate LUNs for the data and logs, especially TempDB also if possible. Back up those KMS cryptographic keys because we're going to need them when we restore the database. This one's optional, truncating those tables. This essentially will put our server into a stop state. SQL tuning performance, that's worth looking at here. Next slide. So a couple of pieces that we should make sure of that are not out of the box for SQL tuning. Our memory, so we always want to grab as much of the physical memory that we're allocated as possible. Typically, physical memory minus 4 to 6 gigs to give us some room for OS and SQL Management Studio, that sort of thing. Maximum degree of parallelism, typically half the physical cores. Cost threshold parallelism, we want to set that to 20. And then we want to optimize ad hoc workloads. So we want to put a true value on that. Again, here there's an article that details step by step on what to do there. Upgrade prep on the console itself. We want to make sure that we've reviewed certs. Don't reboot the server immediately. We want to make sure that we give it a few hours to settle. Get our licenses installed. After those few hours, we can start turning on agent and plugin upgrade policies. We need to ensure that we've redirected our software library and our patch management repository. We should, by the end of that workday that we've built that new server, get a PM import going. Again, validate our maintenance tasks on the SQL box. If possible, leverage a separate agent connectivity credential, and that's really just to mitigate those service account lockouts. Make sure we get that first site server up, running properly and upgraded. Our site servers aren't missing any components. View that site server certificate setting on the SMP is there, especially if you're using deployment solution. And then begin your redirection of your site servers. And once all the site servers are up and running, we can begin redirection. And we begin redirection of those endpoints. We call it the proper way, but we're essentially leveraging the communication profile, creating a new targeted agent settings on the old server. And I've got a quick redirection profile graphic here that I want to end with before we get to Q&A. I know I'm running a little late here. So this is essentially the way we build the communication profile for agent redirection. So once our new box is up and running, we go ahead and we export that new profile from the new server over to the old one. And once it's on the old box, we create a new targeted agent settings, which leverages the profile that we imported from the new server. And then we just go ahead and build migration filters around that new targeted agent settings to give us that phased approach. And this is essentially a flawless approach. Those new agents, when they get their new check-in, they update configuration, they'll automatically redirect. They'll have, everything will be in there. The new URL, the cert certificate will be in there. So if your old box maybe wasn't running over a secured connection, it's now going to be over HTTPS, because everything is inside that new profile. And again, you can ramp this up as you see fit. And on that note, I will apologize for finishing a few minutes late. My email address is up here. If you have any questions, comments, need any guidance around it, as always, we do offer a free complimentary or a free 2-hour assessment of the environment if you need any help. Please feel free to reach out. On that note, I'll open it up to questions. Mike, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting the panel. Thank you.
Yes. So Paul, we've gotten a number of questions throughout the webinar. I've tried to insert them where they made sense. There were a couple that we didn't get a chance to address that I think are worth circling back. One of the questions was, you showed the time sensitive or excuse me, time critical, and the question came out is, does that apply to policies outside of the outside of inventory? Can I use that for patch, which I believe was maybe addressed to some degree, but just for clarification. The question was, can I apply whatever policy I want with time critical management? Oops, did we lose it, Paul? I tell you what, I'll answer it myself then. The answer is yes. So in the meanwhile, we also some of the other questions that came in were with regards to the planning that went into the upgrades, and I know that with one of the upgrades that Paul's been working on, he ran into some situations with the network team and the InfoSec teams in terms of making sure that the change requests addressed the protection on the servers themselves. And because this is the upgrade itself was running the upgrade itself was running things at full speed and needed to have privileged access into various directories, and that it's important to make sure that you can turn off some of the client protection features during the upgrade itself. So certainly in terms of planning for the upgrade, it's important to engage the security team, to engage the network team, and make sure that they understand the changes to the protocols and ports, the amount of traffic that needs to be tuned, as well as some of the requirements on the servers in terms of allowing those upgrades to happen correctly. So those are some of the things that I know had come out of some of his recent experiences. As Paul mentioned, that hybrid approach is really a nice way to go. Being able to access your notification server, your new notification server, be able to test it to tweak any of your bandwidth settings or any of your client settings before migrating your clients over gives you the best of both worlds. That you've used the ease of upgrade of the in-place migration, but yet pulled it on to new hardware or a virtual environment so that you can time your upgrade for your own comfort levels. So some of the other, I believe we've covered the rest of the questions. With that in mind, if we missed your question or if you would just like to have a follow-up conversation, again, please feel free to reach back. We're happy to have a conversation with you individually about your specific environment. I know from our list of attendees, there are some folks who are in the process of planning their upgrades. We certainly can give you some advice. If it makes sense to help you, we'll do that. If it makes sense to just point you in the right direction, we can do that too. So with all of that, I'd like to thank Matt and Paul. Though some of you may not be aware, but Matt was busy handling a lot of the questions and answers that came in while Paul was speaking. So thank you to both of you for a great job today. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We did record this session, and so we'll be reaching out to you as a follow-up, giving you that link so you can go out to our YouTube channel and watch that link, as well as some of the other webinars we've done recently. You may find them useful. So again, with that, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we hope to talk with you soon. Bye-bye.